Good evening, everybody. I'm Sheila McMahon. I'm the director for the Boston College Women's Resource Center. And I'm aware we have quite a few name tags at the back that have not yet been picked up. And we've been speculating as to whether it's the weather or people being late. So I, in the interest of time, want to just go ahead and get started. And if I could just ask everyone, if you could just either turn off or turn off the volume on your cell phones. Our panelists are being recorded this evening, so it's helpful to not have any additional background noise. Thank you very much. So I am pleased to welcome you to this evening's program, Handing on an Inclusive and Just Faith, Parents Reflect. And tonight, as we continue an important conversation established by the Church in the 21st Century Center through the C21 series on women, we are blessed with a precious and rare opportunity to hear from parents, both women and men, who seek to share their Catholic faith with their children in ways that model inclusivity and justice. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to just take a moment to thank the Church in the 21st Century Center staff, John McGinty, Naylor Offel, and their work-study students, as well as Bob Newton and Rosemary Donahue from the University President's Office, who for the opportunity to co-sponsor this exciting program and for their continuing commitment to supporting women in the Catholic Church and here at Boston College. As well, I'd like to recognize members of the C21 Series on Women Advisory Group, without whose inspiration and support this event would not have been possible. The advisory group includes Colleen Griffith, Kelly Armstrong, Patricia DeLue, Kara Treniga, Lisa Cahill, Maria DiCiapari, Kate Daly, Linda McKay, and Katie Spillman. So thank you. I know not everyone was able to be here this evening, but for those of you who are, just thanks so much for all of your wonderful wisdom. And finally, thank you so much to our BC Media Technology Services, the Bureau of Conferences, Dining Services, University Advancement, and Information Technology Services. Of course, all of these offices' expertise make our programs possible. And now to our panel. This evening, as we reflect together, both as parents and as people of faith who hope to one day become parents, we have the opportunity to hear from our friends and colleagues, and I'd just like to take a moment to introduce each of our panelists to you. So I'm going to start at the far end of the table with Bernie O'Kane, who is the Director of Employee Development here at Boston College. He has worked at Boston College for many years, and he didn't specify how many, so that means many.
We don't talk about that.
Okay. In financial aid, in the student life area, and now in human resources. Among other things, Bernie's current responsibilities at BC include the collaborative and Ignatian spirituality programs for university employees, which are fantastic. Bernie has been married for 32 years to Patricia O'Kane, who is the assistant director for the pre-medical programs at Boston College. And they have 3 sons, all BC grads. Connor, who graduated from BC in 2000, who also earned a master's in pastoral ministry from the Institute for Religious Ed and Pastoral Ministry here at BC. And Connor now works in campus ministry at Fairfield University. Their second son, Andrew, graduated from BC in 2003, and he's studying acting in New York City. And their son, Greg, is currently a senior here at Boston College. So welcome, Bernie.
Thank you.
And Jane Regan, who's the Associate Professor in the Theology Department and also full-time faculty at the Institute for Religious Education and Pastoral Ministry here at BC. Jane has worked here at BC for the past 12 years, and her area of research and teaching is adult faith formation, which may be of interest to all of you. She's a nationally recognized speaker in areas of alternative models of faith formation and adult religious education. She's a single parent of 2 daughters, Natalia, who's 18, and Katie, 15, whom she adopted from Russia when they were toddlers. Jane lives in a house with 3 generations of strong Regan women, about whom you'll hear when she speaks this evening, including Jane's 80-year-old mom. So thank you so much, Jane. And Dan Leahy, always short and to the point. In his email messages, I had asked everyone to send me some information on biography. He is the campus minister in the Office of Service and Spirituality for the Boston College Alumni Association. And he's worked at BC for how many years, Dan? almost 12 years at BC. And he and his wife, Joyce, they've been married for 21 years. They have 3 children, Amanda, 18, who is a first-year student here at BC, followed by Michael, age 15, and then Sarah, the baby, at 10. And I just noted in Dan's message that he remarked, the baby. So I know I've come from a large family, and the baby never stops being the baby, even when they're 10 years old. So I appreciated that. And then last but not least, Karen Kennedy, who is the director here at BC of the Urban Catholic Teacher Corps. Karen is originally from Michigan and spent some time at that other Catholic university in Notre Dame, where she earned her bachelor's degree in science business in 2003. And then here she came to BC and graduated in 2005 with a master's degree from Boston College in our higher education program. She and her husband, Sean, whom she met here at BC, were married in July of 2005, and they are proud parents to 15-month-old Cormac Joseph, who is a handful of a monkey and a lot of fun, according to Karen. So we'll have the opportunity to hear from each of our panelists in turn, and then we'll allow some time for conversation at our tables, after which we'll come back together for comments, questions, reflections from all of you and our panelists. And then in celebration, we'll close the evening with a reception, which will take place in the wings of the Heights Room here, to which you're all welcome. So thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm going to turn the microphone over to our first panelist. We decided we would start with Karen, who has the youngest child, and we would go chronologically through the ages of the children that each of our parents have.
Thank you, Sheila. Is this working? Is it on here? That's right. I go first because I actually do have the baby of the group here. Before my son was born, my sister-in-law gave my husband Sean and I a great piece of advice for our future parenting. And that was this: for every decision you make regarding your children, there will be someone who thinks that is the best possible choice you could have made for him and may tell you so. And there is someone who thinks it is the worst possible choice you could have made for your child and may tell you so. Trust yourself. Over our first 15 months of parenting, we've realized how important this is. From sleep habits to faith practice to the never-ending Pampers versus Huggies debate. People always put in their 2 cents, and we're always happy to listen. But it is important to speak from our hearts and to remember, what is most important to us. So it's in this spirit that we come to you tonight, not pledging to be expert parents in any way, shape, or form, but with an honesty and an openness about our own experiences in sharing our faith with our children. Just like some of you, we have children of different ages and different experiences. We come from different backgrounds, but one thing is constant: our desire to include our children in the just and inclusive faith of our Catholicism. We look forward to the conversation with you this evening to get us all thinking reflectively about our parenting practices and our belief systems, and to say, hey, I've been there too, or oh, what a neat idea. I have to admit that when I was asked to be on this panel with some of my own mentors from the past 5 years at Boston College, I thought, no way. These people are excellent parents. They have raised or are raising children to be well-rounded, self-actualized, reflective individuals. My child is 15 months old. 15 months old. This means he's just starting to talk, and yes, his favorite word is no. And he's not yet able to walk without his arms out and up, looking sort of like a mummy. And while he does reflect back the last word of every sentence to us, it's just not quite the same thing. But I also realized that we have to start somewhere, and our journeys as families and as parents do start somewhere. And for that reason, I want to share with you a little bit about my husband Sean and my experience of being parents over the past 2 years. And I think that really started when we found out that we were pregnant, that we were going to be parents. And it moved from there to the course now, so this is 2 years later, through a series of first thinking and praying and being reflective with ourselves about what it was that was important to us as parents, and what was important to us to pass on to our children. And second, talking with each other about that, and then making sure that was really a part of our lives, that we were sort of doing what we were saying we were doing. And lastly, figuring out ways to bring Cormac into our practice of faith in our family. Those of you who know me know I'm a bit of a planner. a bit. So when Sean and I were pregnant, this is something that was really important to me. We had lots of conversations about the take-home messages from our own childhood and what were some of the most important things and how did our parents instill the most important things in us. And then what were the things that we wanted to instill in our children. I'm a big believer that it's important to actually to articulate and to believe these, to voice these things as opposed to just thinking them. And so we came up sort of with our list of things that were important to us. And I think that that's something that we've all had to do up here being on this panel, and something I did before I was pregnant, but I hadn't done it since I had Cormac. And I think it's something that's really, really helpful, actually, when we think about it, to think, what are the things we're passing down, and to actually physically write those out, or talk to our partner about that if we have a partner, or talk to our community about that, about what those things are. So it was important to us that our children had personal relationships with God, and that we raise children who believe that service is not just a part of life, but a way of life. That we raise a child who loves human beings just as Jesus loved all people. And we raise a child who knows and feels the love of Christ through Christian community. And so when we were talking about these things, they sound great in theory, sure, but how do we put them into practice? And the first thing for us was to think about looking at our own lives. And, we want to raise a child who has a personal relationship with God. What do our personal relationships with God like? What is our prayer life with God like? How frequently do we have that one-on-one? How frequently do we do that as a partnership, that triad between us and God? We want to raise a child who believes that service is a way of life, not a part of life. How do we act out in our lives? How do we treat the person who asks us for money on the street? How do we incorporate that into the things that we do? And so on and so on. We want to make our children a part of Christian community. What does our Christian community look like? Is that something that we are practicing in through our parish life and through our relationships with friends and family, or is it just something that we sort of talk about? And so for us, it was a good experience to talk about it, and then to sort of constantly have that conversation with each other and within ourselves about what we were doing about that. I say that I love retreats. I grew up a retreat girl, and one of the best things about retreats is it's a time to stop and think and step back from your day-to-day life and think about things and get connected with God and reflect back on that. And I think that from the time I was pregnant until maybe Cormac was about 5 months old, that was one big retreat. Because you can't really be a part of your same everyday life. You have to conserve your energy. Certainly when Cormac was a newborn, we weren't a part of any regular life, it seems like. And there was a lot of time in there, especially when I was nursing my son. That was my prayer time. That was my time to talk with God every day, and it was a lot of time. I'll tell you that. It was hours and hours sitting in my chair, and these were some of the things I was thinking about and praying about. Actually, when I stopped nursing, I kind of had to rework my prayer life because that was such at the heart of it at that point that I had to think, what are some other ways I can stop and think and reflect and make sure I'm connected back? And so it was during this time that we really used to think about the ways we get Cormac involved in these things. And they're very small. They're nothing compared to someone who has a 15-year-old being a 15-month-old. But they are important, I think. And the first is just that we role model and we work with him on our own prayer lives. We show him what it's like to be a part of our prayer lives, which means praying with him as an infant, praying with him now as a toddler. He has these little wooden rosary beads that he takes around, and even though I'm not a huge rosary prayer, I'm a big person on symbolism, and so looking for more symbols for me is very important for him. We read books we have a church bag that we only take to church, and we read books about faith, and Noah's Ark is actually his favorite. We have a Noah's Ark playset, and we do that a lot. So things like that, I think, are important, as well as finding ways to incorporate that service into being a parent. It's hard to do service when you're a parent of a young child. You can't just bring them along to the soup kitchen all the time because, well, they're not very helpful. And so what are some ways that we can do that as a family? And that includes, actually, 2 weekends ago, we had a big going through old clothes and donating them out. And that's something very small, but at 15 months, he was right in there digging through things. And he wasn't actually picking things to go, but you feel like you're making the actions, and he's picking something up from this. Going downtown and taking food to the people that we see downtown, exposing him to the other, not being afraid to take him out of the little Newton suburb where we live, and taking him this weekend. He's going to a Halloween party in Dorchester, things like that. And also, if we want him to love other people, as Jesus Christ loved other people, to show him that, we'll help the person who dropped their bag in the grocery store, we'll help the person across the street. It's very small ways at this age, and then articulating that's what we're doing. We're helping this person because. And lastly, just making sure that he's involved in a faith community. And though that's not fun at this age, that means taking him to church each and every week. We take turns. One of us takes the liturgy of the word, and one of us takes the liturgy of the Eucharist, actually, so that we each get something where we could pay attention and be involved. But being a single parent, I can't imagine you wouldn't get anything. Just making sure that he's a part of that, establishing our faith community now, having friends over and people over who we know are going to be open with him and who are going to talk with him about things. That's really, really important. Just going through these 3 steps, I think, are things that we've done during his first year that have been helpful for us in sort of setting the foundation, so that I hope one day we will have the wonderful, well-rounded, self-actualized, inclusive, and reflective individuals that the people to the left of me have. So with that, I'll pass it on to Dan.
Thank you, Karen. We were just saying we hope we have those kids someday. But, it's funny when you're describing Cormac at 15 months, I was thinking of the similarities between my 15-year-old, grunting words and walking like this, and the vocabulary has seemed to shrunk as it just grunts and sounds and why. But anyway, it is a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming out. It's nice to be part of a discussion with these folks where there are no experts, but there's rich experience and some very good instincts. So thank you. A couple of thoughts that I would like to just share and then talk a little bit about, just 4 points. And the first one would be, and I sat down with my wife with a glass of wine in front of the fireplace before it got warm, so we did this together, so these are our thoughts. What we've tried to teach our children, first and foremost, is that faith is a relationship. As Catholics, it's a relationship with God through a personal relationship with Jesus. Jesus, the friend, the brother, the Lord. A real and relevant relationship that can influence our lives in whatever direction, to whatever degree that we desire. We wanted Jesus to be a real for them to see Jesus as a real person. I remember when Michael was 6, Michael, who doesn't say a whole lot now, but when he was 6, someone said, "What does your daddy do at work?" And he said, "I think he talks to people about Jesus." And I was very proud of that because Jesus was real, and that's what Daddy did. And so even, after communion, our little ritual was after communion to come back and to talk to Jesus and thank him for what we were ever thankful for. Think of many things that we're thankful for, and that was our time to talk directly to Jesus, in addition to some other prayer time. But the idea was that Jesus is real. The relationship is lived and shaped in the context of community, and this is where it gets tricky. The fact that we had to use the qualifiers tonight, a just and inclusive faith, it's kind of stayed with me in thinking of this remarks, that we needed to qualify that, and because we do need to qualify that. The community can be helpful or it can be damaging, and so we're trying to help our kids navigate the difference. Right now, in many ways, the point of contact for our children really is the worshiping community and Sunday Mass. It's the primary, not the only, but the primary. So in our parish, Michael is bored because he feels everything is irrelevant. He's 15, that's where he is developmentally, but the parish community, the worshiping community, doesn't seem to do a whole lot to reach out and to make it interesting and meaningful for 15-year-olds. No one's ever asked his opinion on what kind of music to play, or what things might want to be included in the homily that would make it real and more interesting to him and the other kids his age. Amanda now, who's 18, has become quite the reader and the intellect and the social critic. She's developed an appetite for meaning, and she's often disappointed at our parish. Not to point fingers or to blame anybody, but there's an opportunity she's looking for, and she comes away disappointed more times than not. And then Sarah is just still darn cute and just goes along for the ride, so she's fine. The essence of the good news for us is that we are loved unconditionally, and this is another big point that we'd like to really model and convey to our children, that they are loved so deeply and so completely by God, by Jesus, by us, their parents, etc., the extended family, that Joyce and I hope that this will make all the difference to them as they make their way out into the world, that they'll go out into the world armed with a healthy self-love. I remember when Sarah the baby, when she was about 6 months old, Sarah the baby. She was Sarah the baby. She was strapped in her car seat, and she was just sitting there probably drooling, and Amanda was 7, and Amanda said to me, "Daddy, do you like Sarah?" And I'm driving. Yes, we don't just like Sarah, we love Sarah. But she doesn't do anything. She doesn't talk, she doesn't play, she just... And I said, but we love her just because she is. She's Sarah, and we love her. And a little light went on in my head, and I thought, I better save that thought. And that's what we've tried to communicate. That's the wisdom of the tradition. In the community, and I forgot to make this point, the community, that we hope our kids feel that they're part of something much larger than them, with a tradition and a heritage of wisdom and wonderful people making a difference. But that's what we try to communicate, that you are loved, and this makes a difference. We want the kids to go out feeling confident and feeling good enough in a society that works very hard to make them feel inadequate so that they will buy a product, or they'll feel terrible about their weight or their size or their hair color or their physical ability so that they can be prey to the consumer market. In high school and college, we see a lot of symptoms coming out of disorders and addictions and things from people who have been victims of this. And finally, on this point about being loved, we would like our kids to feel loved, and to be loved in such a way that they are less critical, less judgmental, and more easily able to forgive themselves, so that they can in turn live the good news as a way to love others. We love God by loving others, and we hope that that's what we can model and pass on to them. And then finally, this last point, we want to help our kids develop a sense of gratitude for everything they have and everything they are in their lives, for the gift of their lives themselves and for everything they have. And this point raises all kinds of points and issues about what we need versus what we want versus what we have, necessities versus luxuries, the influence of the mass media and the pop culture, again, teaching our kids to become mindless little consumers. And I had in my notes to the group that we talk about this almost weekly on Sundays when the sale flyers come out. The kids make their list of what they have. And so we hope that Joyce and I hope that by what we model, by what we value, by what we love, how we shop, the economic justice associated to our purchases, all that stuff, the gratitude that we express as a family to each other, that this might rub off, so that their gratitude can lead to action on behalf of others in the world, especially the poor.
Yeah, thank you. It's excellent. It's great to be here and happy to be spending this time with you. My story is a little different in that I'm a single parent and single by choice. I adopted both of my daughters from Russia. Natalia was 4, just turned 4. In fact, I was there for her 4th birthday in Russia. And Katie was 2 1/2. And although they're not birth siblings, they certainly fight like siblings now. One of the first places I went after Natalia and I got home and settled was the grocery store, right? Gotta get food. And we walked into the grocery store, and all along the side are all those gumball machines, gum and knickknacks and candy and everything. And Natalia, who everything was just unbelievable for her, she went tearing right over there. Okay, this is it. And I just went over and put my arm on her shoulder, and I said, "You know what, honey? Regans don't eat gum from gum machines." She nodded, okay, and kind of walked away. And but she wasn't even speaking English then, so she had no idea what I said, but just knew the message. And so I just kept repeating it. Each time we would go into the store, she'd go over there, and I would say, "You know what, honey? Regans don't buy gum from gum machines." And she would nod. Okay. So eventually, she'd never even say anything about it. She would walk right by it, and it wasn't there for her because vegans don't do that. And I knew it really took hold when about a year and a half, 2 years later, when her sister Katie came. Again, one of the first things we did, of course, was get groceries. And we walked into the grocery store, and Natalia takes Katie over to the gumball machine and stoops down and looks at her and says, "Regans don't get gum from gumball machines." Now, I thought then, and I've thought repeatedly, that if only all of my life were that easy to inculcate into my children, you know? We live just inclusive lives. Yeah, great. But in fact, I do think that story is one that points to the consistency and the need for consistency in how we raise our children and how I've tried to raise my children in their becoming people of justice and people who are inclusive. Now, because they came from Russia, and Natalia was in a Russian orphanage till she was 4, and so they come with a lot of different needs that I was totally unprepared for. But then I'm sure you felt pretty unprepared for. That's not unusual, I know, to be unprepared as a parent. But it certainly meant parenting in a way that I had not planned. You know, I remember saying to a friend of mine before I went to get Natalia that it would be so great to like take her to the theater. The theater. You know, really, we were lucky to be able to go outside without some major catastrophe happening. And so the slow evolution of my growing into being a parent and being a parent that attempted to give expression to what I believe, many of the things that were talked about already, was a process that really took time. But I would say a couple of things. The first thing I would say to any parents, and I said to myself repeatedly, this is not about doing more. Okay? It's probably about doing less. That it's not about, like, I really believe in this stuff. I'm a religious educator. Okay? And I don't do crafty stuff with the kids. Really never did. I mean, usually the Advent wreath, we did that because it was on the kitchen table, so we kind of had to. But many times, you know, it would be Ash Wednesday and then Good Friday. I don't know what happened to Lent. Just in our regular lives. So it's not as though I'm thinking that we're going to be, you know, doing those kinds of things. So we just, I believe in them, and I don't find time for that. But I do find time for being sure that the girls speak to one another and speak to me respectfully, and that notion of mutual respect is key to one of our key but few household rules, that speaking respectfully. And believe me, as the kids got older, it got harder and harder because they're, like all the kids, they're in a situation where they speak to one another in such gruff ways and in such mean ways that, you know, I just declared our house, you can't talk to one another that way here. You want to go outside and talk to one another that way? That's fine. Not in the house. And so they began to slowly take on and to recognize what Regans do and what they don't do. I also realized fairly early on that if they were going to get a sense of what I valued and what I thought was important for our lives, then I needed to be more explicit about it. In other words, a couple of examples. This is the only artsy craftsy thing I did. As a preparation for Christmas, I would make little construction paper bells. Then we'd all decorate with stickers or whatever. And inside, for each day of Advent, I'd put one thing we would do to prepare for Christmas. Okay. And sometimes it was very Christmas things, like we're going to take out the Christmas records or the Christmas discs and start listening to those. But other times, about half the time, they were opportunities for service, or to pray for someone, or to remember to drop a note to someone. As way of helping the children to get that the Christmas isn't about the end, but it's about how we move to that. And it was interesting because I think, I must admit I don't do it now at 18 and 15. They're much less enamored by construction paper bells. But Natalia was easily 14, 15 when she was still asking for it. So I thought that was a pretty good sign. It was part of how she did and how she understood Christmas. In addition to that, it also dawned on me that although I am a steward of the money that I have, and I do have made decisions on where I contribute and who I contribute to, and I've done that with some care, done that with some conscious focus. But the kids don't know that. I mean, so probably now 3 or 4 years ago, I began to talk with them about how we spend our money. And we live fine, you know. But it's like, how do we decide whether or not to do something? Why do we need the best of whatever we get? Why? And then how do we decide on how we distribute money to others, on how we work for justice, not only through actions for justice, but also through gifts and through funding for things. And so that's another aspect that I've begun to talk to the children about. And again, really, it's, as we know, all of us who are parents know, little achievements is all we're looking for. Okay? That Natalia, my older daughter, kind of pretty much all along, probably for the past several years, has been bringing $1 in her pocket every Sunday to throw into church with, you know, when the collection plate comes. And Katie, who is not quite that other thinking yet, okay, actually had some money in her pocket this past Sunday for some reason, and she took it out and she looked at it, and she looked at her sister's $1, and then she just kind of shrugged and threw it in the basket. Like, oh, I'm gonna have to do it anyway. They have picked up what I value and what I see as important. So as they become older and more responsible, they take on the values that I have, and they learn what Regans do. And my hope is that one of the things they're learning is that Regans work for justice and that Regans live in an inclusive context. So, thanks.
She's a tough act to follow, isn't she? Particularly as a single parent. I feel as though I've heard our children's lives' history in these 3 speakers before me, because they was bringing back memories of what it was like when our children were young. Our oldest is a little bit older than Karen, so there's a little bit of a discrepancy here. See if I can remember that far back. But I'm also very pleased to be here tonight, and was thankful when Sheila asked, because this is something that I really hadn't reflected on very much. And our faith has been an important part of our family life, and it was a nice opportunity to actually go back over a number of years and think about different opportunities gained or lost with our children. One thing Sheila asked us to do was to also see if we could see a theme developing in what some of our reflections were. And the theme that I came up with was attempting to lead a life based in faith. And I think attempting is the key word in that, as well as faith. Those are the 2 anchors. Because I've worked at Boston College for so long, as Sheila has said, I've been somewhat immersed happily in Ignatian spirituality. And there's a phrase that the Jesuits use, which I have found to be very enticing for me, and it's our way of proceeding. And it's very much what Jane was saying. It's not doing something extra, but it's how you live your life. And it's the very small things that you don't share with anybody else, and they may not share with you, but it impacts the way that you proceed through your life and use or choose not to use the gifts that you've been given. There were sort of 3 subheadings that I arrived at after that, or that was the first one rather. The second is intentionality, making choices, deliberate choices that we're faced with in life, and some of them are tough to make decisions, what to do in terms of a values decision, or what to allow your son or daughter to purchase or to do, and to work it out with them at different ages. And then the third, last one, which I'll mention, is honoring your child's lived experience. And I think as our children have grown older and we've begun to interact with them on a more adult level, it's really important to have developed that respect that you mentioned on the way up to that process, so that they indeed respect you as parent, and you also respect them as child and adult. I did want to mention, and I know Karen and Dan also mentioned, that the rituals are important. They really are, and some of the memories were fun about the children's Bibles that my wife and I would read to the kids when they were really small, and so that was sort of a natural part of their learning to understand words. At Christmas time, one of my wife's sisters used to always on Christmas Eve help put baby Jesus in the manger and have a cupcake with a candle and sing happy birthday. So that made it real, and it wasn't just giving gifts, but it was just a small thing. And then just as we progressed, involving them in Lenten types of activities in the parish, that type of thing, so they felt that was part of their faith community. One decision that we made was to change parishes, and this was back about 24 years ago, and it was frowned upon. It was a geographic parish and all that, but my wife and I found that we really just weren't satisfied. We weren't being fulfilled with our faith experience, and we wanted our children to have that experience as well. So we made the change and got very involved in a children's mass, which was very effective. The kids could be themselves, but in a respectful way. So if they were crawling around on the floor, at least they were quiet when they were doing it, not just disturbing everybody else. Another decision that we made was to send our sons to Catholic school. And that was a major decision. It was a major financial decision, for one thing. It was a major social decision because all of our neighbors' children went to the local public school. My father-in-law thought we were crazy because we lived within walking distance of the grammar school, middle school, and high school in a decent school system. And he thought, why would you be doing this? But we really felt that the values that we professed and tried to live with our family were not being valued at school in this particular environment. And then a number of situations arose, and we finally decided that, we indeed, if we were going to honor, how we wanted to raise our children in our faith, that we would in fact move them to different schools. And we did that, and it was a long time of paying tuitions. We have one more year to go. He's a senior in college. But it was worth it, for us personally, and I don't say that's a necessity for everybody by any means, but for our particular family situation, this was an investment that we felt we wanted to make in our sons. And for them, it was also a growth experience because they had to, leave, their comfortable suburb, and in fact, in our case, for high school, take a train into Boston. They went to BC High. It was a totally different environment for them. They were immersed in theology and service there, which is what we wanted in the first place. And it gave them a love of others, of difference, the other, I think Dan mentioned earlier, which was very important for us. Also, I think just the idea of the blessing, really, of being able to work at an institution like this for so long. I've been here, as Sheila said, over 30 years, and some of that was choice. There were other opportunities along the road, but what we felt was that what was offered here was really special, and it isn't everywhere that you can go and have a chance to begin the academic year with a Mass of the Holy Spirit, with faculty, staff, and students being there together, to have opportunities to be on retreat with students and be hopefully a mentor in some way, to go on adult retreats, on married couple retreats, various opportunities that are hard to come by, unfortunately, in the busy life that we all lead. But when you're in an environment where that's part of the day-to-day, activities, it makes it easier, and it also sort of incorporates it as a natural part of your life, so that as our sons grew up, we like to say effectively on campus, if you will, this is what they saw. This was the practice that we tried to live and hopefully bring them into it, sometimes successfully, sometimes not as successfully. In terms of opportunities, that one I forgot to mention was service trips through the campus ministry office and some of the other departments at BC. Students go on trips to third world countries, and they ask adults to be leaders on those trips, and it's about a semester-long commitment, and several of us here on the panel have done these. They're amazing transformational experiences, and I had the grace to be able to be on several trips to Kingston, Jamaica, to another part of Jamaica, and then also to Belize in Central America. They were amazing experiences for me, and our boys were younger, and I would be able to come back and share that with them at the dining room table, as best I could, but just to share what I learned, and the fact that I would go down to the grocery store the day after coming back from a school in Belize where the kids had 1 cup of rice to eat for the entire day, and oftentimes because the child next to them had nothing, they would share half of it with them. That was a lesson that I learned, and that's what I tried to bring back to our boys. and was very offended when I'd go down and see the overstocked shelves at the Star Market, and people didn't even bother to buy it. There was so much food there. So that engendered those table discussions, which, again, you don't always get the immediate gratification of them saying, yes, I understand, or I agree, but hopefully in a year or 2 or 5, there's something that's said that you go, yes, they did in fact listen. I think also, and then I'll stop with this point so we can have you talk to one another, because the expertise is at the table, I'm sure. But now observing our sons and our baby, as we say, Dan, our baby is 21 years old just this past summer, which was an astounding period, a marker for us in terms of our family. But each of our sons lives out his faith in different ways, and that's been astounding to see. Our oldest son, Connor, as Sheila mentioned, graduated from here as a theology, theater double major, and then went into the Jesuit Volunteer Corps for 2 years in Central America. Very ignited by social justice, and he's now doing that work full-time at Fairfield University and just absolutely loves it. Loved being in the jungle, the 2 years, was a scout and all that. Our second son, Andrew, who's studying acting in New York City right now, was a film major, was active at BC High, but when he came to BC, was not a part of an active faith community. We were very surprised, but that was his choice, at the time. And so we thought, gee, where is this going? And we'd have conversations about it. He'd certainly come with us to liturgy on holidays and Mother's Day and the days that he had to go, but not other than that. It was about in his junior year, I think, that we heard from a friend of his that freshman year, when he was selecting a roommate, several friends of his from BC High asked if they could live with him, and we had already talked to him about broadening his experience and saying, no, really, you should go with somebody from out of state. It'll be good for you. You'll still have these friends. Turns out that he did, in fact, select a boy that he knew in high school and was his roommate. In fact, he was his roommate freshman year and then a suite mate for 4 years all the way through. We didn't know until he was a junior that the boy was gay and was afraid to live with other people. And so he was doing this in terms of his way of giving his faith. So it still gets to me, sorry. And finally, the little one, Gregory, he's a theater computer science major, so we don't know where he's going to be going at all. But I was sharing when we met earlier this week to talk about this evening that Greg was, again, very active in our parish and also at high school. When he was about a junior in high school, he started to give us trouble about going to church with us on Sunday afternoon when we attended the 5:30 Mass. So being the dutiful parents, we battled with him regularly and weekly, and it went on for about a month or two. And then finally, one day, when we were just about to go out the door, my wife and I both said, if you really don't want to go, then you don't have to come. We're not going to force you, and we'll discuss it, at another time. So we went off feeling a little bit badly that we had failed in some way. And we came back and we sat down for dinner, and at this point he was the only one at home because the other two were off in college, so he unfortunately, as we said, had our undivided attention, which is a whole new thing that you guys will get to at some point. But before we could say anything, he thanked us for listening to him. He said, I appreciate what you're doing. You're allowing me to make my choices. He said, for right now in my life, that's not a community for me that I see as my faith community. I need to find it elsewhere. And he has been doing that in his own way. And in many ways, it was him taking ownership of his faith. And so he's still on a journey, and I think they're all on a journey, and we're on a journey, and that's what makes it very rich. And on the last comment, I sort of like to open and close things out. I had another phrase that I picked up. It's, we have to have faith in our children and their life choices. And that's where we are right now. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing some of your stories with us. And I would imagine as all of you are sitting and listening, these reflections that you're hearing are probably raising many of your own memories and thoughts and experiences as parents or as thinking about being parents. So I just want to give everyone an opportunity just to spend some time in your tables talking about what you've heard and reflecting on your own experience, and then we'll come back together as a group to talk with the panel.